Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello and welcome to Business Innovators Radio. With me today, I have somebody who's been a huge inspiration in my journey since we connected a couple of years ago. His story is absolutely mind-blowing. I remember just being absolutely stunned the first time I heard it. Hopefully he's going to share it with us today. It is Miha. Miha, you're going to have to tell me how to say your surname, I'm afraid.
It's Matlievski.
Matlievski.
Yes.
I thought I was going to attempt it just then, and I thought, no, Luana. Okay, brilliant. I'm so excited to have you here, Miha. So we've been connected a couple of years ago now, and I just remember the first time you shared your story that I was absolutely blown away. And the other thing was that I saw you're a fail coach, and I was thinking, a fail coach? I fail quite nicely all on my own. What's that about? So I'm going to let you explain. What does a fail coach mean?
Well, I mean, there's a few things that go into fail coach. One is it's very important for you as the entrepreneur to have healthy relationship with failure, which is a logical relationship, not an emotional one. So that's one thing. And then it's all about laying down the foundations so that when you do fail, you can recognize failure sooner, you can react sooner, bounce back sooner. And so you can really fail more and fail fast and achieve success so much faster. So those are kind of like a few things, what the whole point of fail coach is. And sometimes it's also letting people experience enough pain so that they actually are ready to change some behavior that's not beneficial to what they want, but then because of some emotions, they don't do the steps, and of course they don't achieve what they want. But sometimes, you have to let them fail a little bit, even more, so that they come to the point of pain that is enough for them to say, okay, it's time for change.
Wow. I love that. I absolutely love that attitude. And it completely makes sense to me because there's been a few things, a few instances where I've failed, not just once, but I've repeated the same mistake over and over and over again until I've learned. And it's, that's how we improve, isn't it? That's how we grow and that's how we learn. And in my eyes, my mistakes have taught me more than any sort of education ever has.
Well, in the reality, one thing is when you're going through something, usually you can't really see yet why it's good. It takes quite a few years of practicing mindfulness, emotional intelligence, things like that you can start seeing the benefits almost straight away. But for most people, it takes, a few months or a few years. And then when we look back, we always find that the most terrible situations gave us the most and taught us the most. But of course, when you're going through it, it's usually not fun. But with time, if you really practice these things, you can literally brainwash yourself so that you can't react with negativity. But it takes quite a few, at least for me, it took me, I don't know, probably 5, 6, 7 years to really practice that over and over and over again, where now whatever hits me, I'm like, okay, what can I learn? What lesson is life trying to teach me here? And I go straight into that, bounce back mood without even an inch into the negativity. But yeah, it took me many, many years to brainwash myself to the point where I can do that.
That's amazing. And I have to admit, when I heard your story, I was just thinking, how did you recover from that? So let's go into that next.
Okay.
What happened?
It's a long story.
Yeah.
We don't have so much time, but I'll try to just quickly go through it. So I dropped out of high school when I was 18, started my entrepreneurial journey. Fast forward, before I was 30, I had several successful businesses, 7, 8 figures, multiple 8-figure with one. One of them was in real estate and so on. But looking back, what all those businesses were lacking was solid foundations. And I was just riding that good macroeconomic situation at that time before the crash. And then when the crash happened, because my businesses were like that first house from the Three Little Pigs story, made out of straw, so that when the crisis came, everything was blown away literally in 24 hours because they were so connected one to another. Months of depression, anxiety, darkness starts creeping in, and it's stronger and stronger. Your head wants to blow up like a nuclear reactor, until you start thinking about suicide. It's more and more inviting, because for me it was, you might suffer for a second, but then everything is gone, and that silence, that peace will come into your head. And that's what I was really wanting at that time. And so one evening, spring 2010, I was smoking a cigarette on the balcony. My apartment was just a few days from being taken away from me. And I just climbed on the other side of the fence. I remember how I was holding myself with my left arm, and I was already quite inclined over the edge, looking down. And I was, as I was looking down, I was like, will I do this right or not? Because I was only on the 5th floor. If you're on the 20th floor, that's a no-brainer. You jump, you're dead. On the 5th floor, you might be unlucky. For me, that would be unlucky at that time, would be to, just end up on a wheelchair, stay alive, because then the nuclear reactor in my head wouldn't go away. And in that moment of, looking down, thinking that, it just burst out of me. It was like, two Mihas having a dialogue. And then one Miha was just yelling at the other Miha, like, you messed up this, you did that. And it was really the first time when I took ownership of all my past mistakes. Because at that time, if you remember those times, it was really easy to blame it on the economy, on the crash. Newspapers were full of it. Everybody was blaming that, in governments and so on. But the thing is, when you do that, you put yourself in this passive situation. And it was that ownership. And then I had the aha moment, which was really, well, I already did it once. And now if I do things differently, if I change, I can do it even bigger. And that was that little ray of light that started shining out on the other side of a huge long tunnel. And I was always a fighter. I was somebody who was always a fighter, as long as there is just this little hope at the end of the tunnel. But for months, because of depression, anxiety, darkness, I wasn't seeing, any tunnel or any light. And then I climbed back in, I made a list of everything I need to do and change and so on. And it wasn't like a smooth ride. It's not like, oh, now you had an aha moment and everything is just upwards from here. I mean, it was 3.5, 4 years of constant struggle, constant battles with the old Miha, old habits, old things, and what I want to achieve and who I want to be and so on. It was a lot of figuring out who I am, what do I stand for, what are my values, beliefs, And then, all the business development that I had to go through, learning, what are foundations, how do you lay them down, and how do you ground yourself, how do you balance yourself, things like mindfulness, emotional intelligence, and so on. So it was a long journey, and it wasn't an easy battle. I mean, that's something that I recently saw, that people think, oh, you had that aha moment and then it was just upwards from there. And it wasn't. So that's why now I really make a point to tell everybody that, no, it wasn't an easy road. And I was constantly in the battle with myself. But then in 2014, with all the lessons, all the new knowledge, I started another startup. I was able to scale that one to multiple 8 figures in the first year, multiple 9 figures next year, had a successful Fortune 100 exit, repaid all my past debts that accumulated to almost 7 million by that time. And found myself with the freedom of time, freedom of money, and what I call, when you have both of those, you have the freedom of choice. And I did go to Portugal. I remember I went to Lisbon for vacation for 2-3 weeks. And I know you're in Portugal as well. After 3 days of fado and the red wine and all of that, I was like, okay, meetup app. Like, are there any meetups here? I mean, that was enough of partying and having fun. Now I need to be surrounded by entrepreneurs. I need to chit chat with them and brainstorm and this and that. And so when they learned my story, they all started asking me, how do you do this? How do you do that? And the more I was helping others, the more I felt truly like a billionaire on the inside. And I kind of like just fell into the whole coaching business. And when I was thinking how to name that, I remember it was me and my friend. We had a few beers already. And he said, well, Miha, you constantly start every story with your failures. You constantly talk about how you can't avoid failure, but what you can do to minimize it, how your relationship with failure is important, and so on. You're the fail coach. And, I don't know, maybe it was the beer, but I just loved it. And ever since, I've been the fail coach.
Extraordinary. So, am I right in thinking that when those businesses went during those 24 hours, was the debt something like 5 million?
So I went from positive 15 to minus 5.
All within 24 hours?
Yeah, I mean, in the same day. The thing was, now, at least in this part of Europe, when you go for a big loan, you need to co-sign that loan. And I don't know if you have something like that in UK, but in this, again, in the Eurozone, there is this blind approval that you give to the bank, that they don't have to go to court or anything. They have that document. And because all my other companies co-signed for the loan for my real estate investment, the bank that was funding that real estate investment was able to go to all my companies, just provide that paper to all those banks, and immediately whatever was on the account was transferred to them. And also that paper stays in. So anything that comes in goes straight to the bank. I don't know. I mean, I know how it's called in Slovenian, but I really don't know what an international term for that is. I don't think the Americans have something like that from what I've talked with them, but it's fairly, at least in Slovenia, it's a very, very traditional thing. Whenever you go to the bank for the loan, you kind of pre-sign this bianco paper, allowing them, if you don't return the money when they want it, they can just go to all your other assets and to bank. You kind of pre-approve them that they can take your assets and your money away from you. It's a very standard thing in Slovenia. I'm not really sure how popular this thing is in other places, but in Slovenia, I don't know of a single loan that would be approved to a company unless you are like this huge, big, company like Apple. Then you don't need that. But for small businesses and medium businesses, the owner always needs to co-sign that. And so I went, literally, like they called me in the morning. Throughout the day, they send that document to the banks, and by the end of the day, literally in 8 hours, for as long as the banking is working, everything was closed up.
Wow. How did that feel, Miha? That day when you found out what was happening, what was going through your mind?
That day, nothing. That day, I was like, okay, I can solve that. I can find ways. I can. I actually made a list of a few ideas, because my other businesses were in good industries, and I can arrange another contract. I can do this. I can do that. But the whole crisis came in, and that was just me, thinking about the good times, what I can do. Like a year prior to that, I would probably pull it off. But that whole crisis changed everything. And when people learned what happened to me, nobody wanted to do business with me. So it was a little bit strange situation. So it took me probably 2 or 3 weeks before it really hit me that, I can't solve this. But for the first 2-3 weeks, because during that good economy time, I didn't see that back then, that it's the economy booming. I thought that I'm such a great and amazing entrepreneur, and I came into this situation very cocky. I can solve this. What happened, but I'll figure it out. I'll solve this. And it took me 2-3 weeks to really understand, I'm not going to solve this.
And then how did it feel when it clicked that actually it's not going to be that easy?
It didn't feel good, because in that time, so let's say the first week or two, phone call, because the bank got most of the money back. What ended up happening was I wasn't able to pay paychecks to all my employees. I wasn't able to pay suppliers, small businesses, big businesses. It felt like I owe money to half of the country. And those phone calls weren't any longer, hey, we're just checking up. It was, we're going to sue you. Or some even went a little bit even further, with, we're going to do this and this to you. And back then, you're all emotional. You're in this chaos. Your head is ready to explode. And I believed it. I mean, now looking back, of course, nobody would kill me. Why would they go to jail just because I owed them money? It doesn't make any sense. But, people say the strangest things when, because everybody was hit with the recession. And a lot of those businesses were small businesses, family businesses that really relied on that money. They needed that for their paychecks and so on. So it was like a domino effect. Not just what happened to me, but everything that was happening in the overall economy. And of course, it wasn't nice. I don't like. I went straight from I can solve this to just staying at home, lying on the couch. I was, curled up in that, what is it called? The fetus position, or how that baby, or curled up. I remember every time a phone rang, or even the notification sound for an email, I was on the verge of heart attack before I even looked at it. And sometimes, it was my mom or, a friend or something. But every time, every sound that came out of the phone, every time somebody rings your bell, you go to the balcony and who is it? You're afraid to go to the supermarket because what if you meet somebody and they make this whole thing in the middle of the supermarket, and it's strange. It was really, really dark, strange times, and in that process, it wasn't just that I lost all my businesses, all my assets. I also got divorced. Most of my friends were actually people I thought were my amazing friends, who we were together in Rotary Club and Lions Club and President Cigar Club and all that, poshy stuff. And they were the first one who never answered my call. So I was left with maybe 2-3 people who I was able to talk to. They couldn't help me because they were just, employees. My friends who I employed in my businesses were the first to leave the ship when, it started sinking. I got biggest threats from, them, people who I helped because they couldn't find a job elsewhere. And now that everything went down the drain, they were the first ones and the biggest problems. So yeah, it kind of like all collapsed on me, and you feel all alone. You start asking yourself stupid questions, like, oh, why God, why me? What harm have I done in this world, and so on. I mean, things that will never produce any results. You start coming up because you have plenty of time, and plenty of time is not always a good thing, because then you have plenty of time to create such stories that probably Hans Christian Andersen would be, happy to write down. I mean, and then you start selling these stories to yourself, and it was just a very dark time. I remember a friend of mine called me, and he had his birthday coming in 2-3 weeks time. I don't know exactly how long. And he was like, oh, I need to make a reservation, so I'm checking who's coming, who's not. And I remember he called me on the phone. I opened my mouth and I wasn't able to produce a sound. I wanted to say yes, but my mind was saying, are you crazy? Are you even going to be alive tomorrow? And that's your daily reality. You wake up, phone calls. Those phone calls turn to worse, and you don't want to go to sleep because you want to prolong those hours of at least not having phone calls, the night hours. So every day I was trying, I would just be awake until I would fall asleep at my desk. I was at my, how many times I woke up in the morning with the keyboard, on my forehead. You could actually see keys there because I would just go on for as long as I can, just to prolong that time from when the phone calls stop to when they start again. And things like that. I mean, it was just, like super, super crazy, dark. And that's why the idea of suicide starts coming, and it was like more and more inviting every single time I was thinking about it. You start doing some research, you start figuring out whether do the pills or cut your veins, or I mean, I honestly don't know, because like my threshold for how much pain I when I go to the dentist, I don't open my mouth without him giving me, the sedation. So I don't know why I climbed on the other side of the balcony. Like, I really don't understand, because, just the idea of throwing yourself, like, that's not, I always consider myself, the pill taker. You take the pills and you fall asleep and you just don't wake up. I mean, it seems like the most unpainful way to go. And I was researching a lot of that. So why I climbed on the other side, I honestly, I still don't know. I still don't know how long that whole monologue, dialogue thing took on the balcony. I mean, when I look back at it, it seems like it was at least 10, 15, 20 minutes, but in reality, maybe it was like a minute. I have no idea.
Did anything happen in particular? Did anything in particular happen on that day? You know, something that made you think, right, I've had enough.
No, it was just a regular depressive, dark day. You know, I was on the balcony smoking cigarettes, and I just climbed over. And I was constantly in my head, you know, overthinking, thinking like about no way of seeing any future, overthinking past events, blaming everybody and everything, and so on. So it wasn't like anything special that day, at least not that I can recollect. I think it came to the point where enough was enough. Because, you know, every day was like that. And I guess it was just adding a little bit on top of you know, everything from the past day.
So what would you say to somebody who might be listening to this, who might be feeling that way now?
Don't close yourself, you know? I mean, just go talk to somebody, a therapist, or you know, a friend, or whoever. Just find somebody you can share. Even find somebody online, somebody you've never met, somebody, because, you know, it's you have these feelings of shame and you know, and so on. So maybe it might be hard to talk with somebody who knows you. Just, you know, but let it out. That's the first step of the healing. Because the thing is, when you just have it in you, it just adds the pain and you know, it's almost like you might laugh, but you know, when you have that feeling of constipation, and the longer you don't go to the toilet, the stronger that feeling is. You know, it's almost the same. Now just imagine that, you know, you're constipated for like 2 months straight. How painful on the inside that would probably feel. So just let it out. That's the first step. Then, you know, that will ease up the pain, and then you can start, but find help. It's impossible. I think if I look back, it's almost impossible to solve this on your own. I don't know how you can, you know, do it on your own. Thankfully, there was this one friend who then started, like, after that next day, we started every day going for a walk together, and, you know, just sharing, opening, talking, discussing things. He was this support that I needed at that time.
That's amazing.
You need somebody. I mean, it's really, really hard to solve it on your. I don't know if it's even possible. I don't know, but you have to let it out.
Yeah, definitely. So how do people develop? Well, first of all, what would you say is a healthy relationship with failure? How would you define that? It's
non-emotional.
Non-emotional.
That's the first thing. Your relationship with failure needs to be logical, because emotions cloud our vision, and you don't want, because failure, you know, when you are non-emotional. So what failure really is, you set a goal, you tried something, it didn't work, move on. You know, it's just that, nothing else. It's when we add those emotions into the mix. Now, of course, you know, you need some strong foundations to be able to have that non-emotional relationship. So one is mindfulness, practice mindfulness, because mindfulness lets you step away from the current moment. When something happens to you, you can step away and not react with an autopilot. Most of the time, the autopilot will be an emotional one. And then the second thing that you have to practice is emotional intelligence, which will give you a better understanding which to use when, the left or the right side, the heart or the logic. So those are two very important things when it comes to foundations on the relationship with failure: mindfulness and emotional intelligence. Of course, that doesn't mean that things don't happen to me anymore. Of course they do, nonstop. It's just my reaction is completely different. And of course, because of the foundations, which are also processes, KPIs, benchmarking, and so on, I can recognize failure sooner. I can react sooner. So I don't go so deep anymore. If I had strong foundations in those businesses, I would probably be able to survive completely differently through that period.
And what are those
sooner.
And what are those strong foundations that people need to have in place?
Well, a little bit of everything. So a little, like you, the entrepreneur, or you, the human being, you are that first pillar of that foundation. And you need some soft skills, you need some hard skills, like I mentioned, emotional intelligence, mindfulness. You need to have some, right beliefs, some right mindsets, like taking ownership, being a doer, not an excuse maker, and so on. So it all starts with you, and then when it comes to business, you have the soft and the hard things as well. So the hard things would be, like I said, processes, KPIs, benchmarks, systems, automatizations, and so on. And then the softer ones would be brand story, company culture. Because, company culture, if you don't create one, it will create by itself, but then it might not be what you want for your business. So, things like that. I mean, there's plenty, and it isn't like one size fits all. It really depends where you want to be in the next 2 years' time. So for a 6-figure business, you can lay down a much softer foundations than if you want to go to 8, 9, 10 figures. It's a different way of, for a 6-figure business, you might be dealing with, 4 or 5 VAs, freelancers that help you here and there. Now with an 8-figure business, you are probably dealing with a few hundred people. So like HR foundations are completely different.
And how do you deal with the pressure of having all those extra stuff and everything else that goes along with having a 7 or 8-figure business?
Well, I mean, it's if you lay down good foundations, if you have a good system, it really isn't something that is a pressure. It's really very enjoyable. But a lot of entrepreneurs think that first you grow and then you lay foundations, but it's not. Building a business is like building a house, really. So first you need a plan, like a blueprint, and then you lay down foundations and then you grow. And so if you do foundations for a 6-figure business, well, you can't grow to 8 figures with that foundation. Eventually, it will all fall down. And if you want an 8-figure business, you lay down foundations. With 8 figures, you will have a C-level team. You will have middle management. You then need to do the right HR part, finding right people for the not right, like people who have all the right qualities for that particular spot that you are filling out. And if you do those things right, well, one of the things that I'm often teaching 7, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs when we do the one-on-one coaching is a thing that I call 4-hour-a-week CEO. Of course,
Okay.
it takes a few months of all the foundations, but then the operational part of the CEO function can be done in 4 hours. Another thing is that, as a CEO, you need to, do public appearances, talk with, like big customers, things like that. Like, being the front man, being the ambassador of the company. But that boring stuff and the bureaucratic stuff and the technical stuff, you can boil it down to 3-4 hours a week. That's why you want a system in place, a good system that you trust. And trust is really the key element here. Most of the time, when I'm working with entrepreneurs who have the freedom of money, but they don't have the freedom of time, the problem is that they don't have a system in place that they would trust, with checks and balances that can show them whether everything is going well or not. And because they don't have a system, they don't trust the system that they might have, they can't let go, and then they are all over the place, and they are usually doing all of the income generating functions.
Yeah, I've definitely fallen into that trap myself, Miha.
We all do at one point or another.
Yeah, it's another one of those lessons, isn't it? Well,
Yes.
Miha, this has been, eye-opening and inspiring on so many levels. I just want to move on now to a little section that I like to call Get in the Bin. Now, for this section, Miha, you get to choose one business practice or idea that you don't like. And you have the power today to dispose of that, never to be seen again. What's it going to be?
That would be magnificent if it really would never be seen again. I'm afraid it won't happen, but it would definitely be the cold, hard pitching that we all get, especially on LinkedIn, on Facebook, people adding us, and then bam, 1 second later, you have this whole pitch: join this, do this, buy this, without any relationship building first.
Yeah.
That's something. I do my citizenship work there, and I do make sure that all of them get reported. But yeah, I don't think that's going away, but it would be, that would be a nice one.
I think that's something that gets to a lot of people, but it's still being taught. And do you know what? I've done it in the past. When I was just starting, I didn't know what to do. And I think a lot of people are the same. When they start, they don't know how to do things.
Luana.
And so they try it. Yes.
Luana, two things that you need. And so if anybody's still doing that, of your listeners, two things: a little bit of empathy. Don't do to others what you don't want people to do to you.
100%.
And the second one is, when you write something out, read it out loud. Because when you're still marinating that inside your head with the inner monologue, it might sound okay, but when you read it out loud, it gets like this different dimension. And you say, no, I'm not going to send that. That's so salesy and sleazy and pitchy and so on. So just, those two things: a little bit of empathy and just read it out loud.
Definitely. Well, there you go. Cold pitching is in the bin. It's gone. Miha, how can people find you?
They can go to Google and search Fail Coach. I'm still the only one, so the first few pages of Google results will be all our website and social media platforms and so on, and then they can just choose whichever one they prefer and connect with me and my team there.
Perfect. Get yourselves over to Google and Google Fail Coach. Brilliant. Miha, Thank you so much. This has been absolutely brilliant. I always enjoy our conversations, but this one has been truly amazing.
Well, thank you, Luana. I always love our conversations as well, and it's really a pleasure to be your guest.
And to everyone listening, thank you and goodbye.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.